Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Anthony Hinnon, Pennsylvania writer for the Center Square. Joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania editor, Kristen Smith. Kristen, you wrote something recently about the uncertain revenue future for Pennsylvania's general budget. What can you tell us about what we can be expecting here?
So this week, for context, the Senate and the House began about a month of budget hearings where each department comes before the Senate Appropriations Committee and comes before the House Appropriations Committee and talks about, their funding needs, their main policy priorities. This is really like setting the stage for what our annual budget is going to look like come June 30th. And so in the Senate, they started off with the heavy hitters, which would be the Department of Revenue and the Independent Fiscal Office. Both of those agencies they both aligned on the idea that, yes, we are spending more than we're making in the budget proposal from this year from Governor Josh Shapiro and in the next 4 to 5 years. There's some disagreement on how much more we're spending than we're taking in. Shapiro's revenue projections put us, about $2.5 billion in the hole by 2027. The Independent Fiscal Office says that's more like $3.1 billion. When you look at legislative leaders on the Republican side, they are forecasting much more bleak numbers in the neighborhood of $5 to $10 billion. And so what could offset this, according to Acting Revenue Secretary Pat Browne, is some of the investments and policies that we make to keep working age Pennsylvanians here. And so the idea being that if you make Pennsylvania a better place to work and to raise a family, that will increase tax revenue. And therefore, the budget deficit that we have will go away feasibly. This is kind of a more optimistic take that we've heard from other Democratic governors and lawmakers over the years. Although Shapiro's spending request and his expectations about what our revenue will be, I would say, is a lot more conservative than what you would see under the former administration. The Independent Fiscal Office says that, yes, those things could change our numbers, but what the IFO does that is different, they're nonpartisan. So that means they're not beholden to any politician or any ideology. They're not on Republican side. They're not on Democrat side. They are specifically looking at the numbers here. And so they call their analysis simulations, not forecasts. And their simulations, basically, they input two numbers. They say, and this is a very distilled down version, everyone. So they say, we expect spending to grow between 2% and 3%. We expect expenditures to grow between 2.5% to 3.5%. Ergo, this is how we get our budget deficit. And those inputs change if you're the governor's administration or if you're Republicans. You can see how very easily they can get different numbers in this deficit. The big looming question, the big gray cloud over all of this is, broadly speaking, our economy nationwide. The IFO brought up, some very interesting points that things as, nationalized as student loan forgiveness, which is, we will probably get a decision on by the end of June. That would take $7.7 billion out of Pennsylvania's economy because those student loan borrowers would presumably have less to spend if they were forced to resume payments on their loans. So that would affect tax revenues, right? There's also consumer confidence after some of these banking collapses. Inflation is out there. So there's just a lot of economic forces at play that are making our revenue future very uncertain. And like I said, it seems to be that both sides agree on this.
Do we have any insight here on whether we should be optimistic? I mean, is Pennsylvania trending at least in some positive directions here? Or are we seeing a lot of, really hoping that we line up on all cylinders here?
I think if we changed absolutely nothing, if these policies that the administration puts forth, don't come to fruition or don't perform as expected, such as making it easier for people to rejoin the workforce because childcare is more affordable. If that doesn't have the impact that they want, then the tax revenues are not going to be there. Same thing with, in the out years, the Shapiro administration wants to legalize adult use cannabis. That could be a lot of money coming into our bank account that would make a big difference in the deficit. In fact, it may almost erase it. Other expected revenues, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, whether or not that comes into play, that's another $650-ish million that we could have in our bank account. But a lot of those things, again, they're mired in court or they have a really long way to go through the legislative process. To bank on those things is probably foolish, and to be more conservative in what our spending is going to look like makes more sense no matter where you are, policy speaking. The other thing, too, that is problematic. And we've gone through this before in this state. We have stimulus money that was given to us during COVID to the tune of $10 billion, maybe more than that. And we've spent it over the last couple of years, artificially propping up our budget so it looks like we don't have a deficit. Right now, we have a $5.6 billion rainy day fund, which is bigger than it's ever been, but still puts us behind a lot of states nationally. The administration wants to drain a lot of that over the next 5 years. So we'll have less than $300,000 in it. So you can imagine, like the IFO said, if nothing big changes policy-wise, we're going to be $3.1 billion in the hole. There's a lot of things that have to happen here, and there's a lot of optimistic projections on the policy side that I think it's fair for taxpayers to question whether those policies will actually deliver the returns that the administration promises.
Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Kristen Smith, this is Anthony Hinnon. Please subscribe, and thanks for listening.
Freedom and liberty are important to all of us. If you're looking for civil, intellectual conversations with those shaping the future of freedom, try the Future of Freedom podcast with me, Scott Bertram. We speak with leaders across the country in the greater conservative and libertarian movements. In-depth conversations about where the next intellectual battles will happen across the country. It's the Future of Freedom podcast. Find it at americastalking.com or wherever you get your podcasts.